Hi there, Steve Kaufman. I wanted to follow up my video of yesterday where I spoke of the need to learn and experience things before we try to start studying them in a deliberate fashion. And I got an answer or a comment from one person. I don't know whether it was on my blog, thelinguistonlanguage.com, or at YouTube. And they said, well, surely what you mean is acquisition, not learning. I said, what do you mean? I went back, well, because your method of language learning is largely based on input, therefore you really mean language acquisition, which Krashen defines this way, as opposed to learning. And I said, no, we learn. We learn all the time. Why is it, as much as I respect Stephen Krashen for his position on many things, the fact that he chooses to call the process of learning a language acquisition, that does not then make that some kind of jargon that we all have to use. In fact, I don't like the word acquisition. I don't acquire a language. I don't acquire words. They go in, they get lost somewhere in my brain. I very much learn through a process of experiencing the language through reading and listening, mostly listening to things of interest. I learn because my brain learns. I learn every day as I experience new things. I don't acquire those things. I just learn, and the brain starts to form patterns that help it process and deal with this information that's coming to it. That's the process. It's not acquiring. You're not taking, I've learned this word, and now I have acquired this other word and this other word. I mean, that's not it at all. It's a process of learning and getting used to and labeling things so that we're able to deal with them, because we don't want to have to think it through from scratch every time. So the brain starts to form some patterns that help it then quickly deal with something that they have already experienced before. And that's a gradual process of learning. Call it acquisition. I don't care what you call it. But that someone should take the trouble to comment and say, well, no, you don't actually mean learning. You should be saying acquisition. It's this whole jargonization of this very natural process of language learning that I find very annoying. It's as if we need some special jargon for how to walk, or how to breathe. We don't need the jargon. They talk, SLA, second language acquisition. There's ESL, English as a second language, as opposed to EFL, English as a foreign language. Then someone came up with AAL, English as another language. Who cares? The process of learning is essentially the same. You can have a person in an ESL situation, in other words, someone, say, living in Canada trying to learn English, who has less contact with native speakers than someone living in some foreign country where it's EFL, but where they have English-speaking friends, whereas the immigrant here may in fact only have Chinese-speaking friends. So what does it matter? ESL, EFL, EAL, I don't know. There's all kinds of these terms, like interlanguage. Interlanguage supposedly is this idea that we're between the language, our native language, and the language we're trying to learn. So we haven't totally switched to this new language. Well, what does it matter? The language, as I learn another language, I am gradually progressing. Yes, my native language influences how I use that language. Yes, it will always influence how I use that language in terms of pronunciation, in terms of my choice of words, and so forth. But gradually, as I develop new patterns to deal with the new language, I'm more and more comfortable in the new language. It's a constant state of progression. Why term it interlanguage? No. If I'm speaking Russian, as poorly as I speak it, I'm speaking Russian. I'm not speaking interlanguage. It's the same with fossilization. It suggests that there's some objective event or some thing that's outside the control of the learner that causes them to fossilize and not be able to progress further in the language. I don't believe that. I think that there are things that make language learning difficult when you're beginning and even at a later stage. And if you have the determination, and if you focus, and if you're motivated, and if you like the language, and if you surround yourself with native speakers, you will continue to improve in the language. Some people may do better than others in pronunciation, in their use of words. Some have a bigger vocabulary, but they all have the ability to continue to improve. They are not fossilized unless they choose to, or don't have the interest, or quite satisfied with their existing level in the language. But it's a subjective thing. It's not an objective thing. And I mean, I can't remember all these other terms. There's lots of them. Language acquisition, language learning, I prefer the term learning because it's a constant, random process whereby the brain gradually gets used to something. I don't believe the brain acquires the language, like now I have it, it's mine. I don't believe that's the process at all. So let's not have too much jargon when we talk about language learning. It's unavoidable that there is some. We see it in grammar where, just to get back to the subject, when I learned Chinese and Japanese, I mean, there isn't much grammar in Chinese, and I never remember any grammar terms when I was learning Chinese or Japanese, but now they've, not to be outdone by the people who do, Russian and all these other languages, they have to come up with special terms to explain things that don't need to be explained. We don't need the jargon. I remember in Korean where a lot of the verbs, the endings imply, in order to, or because, or there's a bunch of meaning that comes with the ending. So they come at the end. Well, they have a term for this. It's called copulative verbs. Like, are you kidding me? We don't need that. There's a verb. It has this ending. It means this. So I think I've gone on long enough on this subject, but I must say when I saw that comment about you really mean to say language acquisition, it kind of made me think about how much the simple natural process of language learning is basically disrupted by all of these supposedly well-meaning people who invest so much time in coming up with all kinds of complicated explanations, terminology, and so forth. I am sure that will generate a lot of criticism from my linguistics friends. Thank you.